Chris. Welcome to the show. I'm delighted to have you here. It has been, I've been excited to get you on this episode since we met last week. I feel like we're going to have a great time here, man. So welcome to the show.
Thanks, Alex. I am looking forward to this as well. It's been fun to get to chat and get to know you a little bit better and understand what you and Gotlanded do.
Thank you, man. I appreciate that. I always ask my guests when we start the pod, what they do, who they are, and how it's in particular like their journey, how they got to where they are today. I have a history of kind of like botching, kind of underselling my guest intro. So I rather have my guests introduce themselves now, and we go from there. So without further ado, do you mind telling us a bit about who you are, what you do, and how you got to where you are today?
Sure. And I will, let's see if I can botch my own. That way I'll try to just kind of see with you. So, hi, my name is Chris Chavara. We'll leave it at that. I'm a principal in a consultancy called Scotch Game. It's a business that really specifically focuses on multi-unit retail and restaurants, and is focused on sort of the growth aspect of that business, whether that's product and pricing, new concept development, marketing, things like that. So my journey, it started in a small town. No, I'm kidding. I think what I'll talk about is sort of most of my career has been in hospitality. I've worked in large chain restaurants, contract food service, done business with small startups as well. But in terms of Scotch Game, how I got to where I am right now, was at Cracker Barrel Old Country Store for over 10 years, running a variety of revenue-related functions, really, as I said, product and pricing and marketing and things like that. When I left there, one of the things that I had begun to become apparent to me in that process was that there were some gaps in the marketplace. And there were some gaps in terms of how companies were thinking about growth on two levels. One was that they were either over-engineered in the process side, too much process that was inhibiting them, or they just didn't have the basics in place to be able to get them to the right outcomes. So that was one. And then the second piece was just leveraging really a lot of the good thinking that's in the marketplace already from a variety of sources, and how that would influence strategy and choices like that. So for me, at the end of the day, it was bringing those two things into the space. Running a restaurant's a really hard thing, I think, as you know, right? At the end of the day, margins are slim, lots of moving pieces. There was a CEO at Cracker Barrel, used to have a thing on his desk, which was, restaurants are simple is hard. That's really true. So, and the growth pieces, I think, is a bit of an enigma for people, simply because most operators look at their business and they feel like they've got a bunch of controllables. I know how to control food. I know how to control labor. I know how to control disposables. And they get to growth and they want that same level of control. And at some point, there are things you can do to get that control, but it is inherently a little more messy. So just helping companies think and work some of that stuff through is what I focus on.
That's awesome. And, I think the quote that your colleague at Cracker Barrel had on the desk is like really like the theme for everybody. Running a restaurant is simple and simple is hard. I think I actually might use that as the quote for the episode nearly, because it's like, it's such there's so much truth in that adage. Like a lot of times, when I have people on the pod, for example, all the advice that we talk about or the things we talk about is like, oh my God, this is so simple. It's so obvious, right. The obvious things, but the devil is in the detail when it comes to these kind of obvious executions, or like you would say, it's not as simple, and I find that quite interesting. We were talking in our notes, beforehand, that you have particular insight into like where restaurants can win and where they can play. And I'm curious, given that you're now like in like that sort of observer consultant, you see it from a myriad of different places. So like, do you want to give us a little like kind of insight into like where do you think restaurants have the right to play and the right to win?
Yeah. So the way that I often talk with restaurants about is that, concepts of where to play and how to win. From a where to play perspective, people typically think about it in terms of markets, right? Like what markets are you going to serve? What are you going to go after? Do you understand them? All those pieces. Where I see a lot of restaurants sort of sometimes not pull the thread all the way through is the when question. When is somebody going to use? What's the occasion around that specifically? And the needs that tie to that. And the ability to articulate those two pieces with the who is really where the power starts to come in. So if we were to just think about, I don't know, we can just take a group of people, like we could basically say, and you can do it, the fun part here, Alex, you do it from either direction. You can get at this from
Yeah.
either direction. So you could start with like, people who are dealing with sort of being time starved, looking for better for you options at lunch. Who's that group of people? Right. And so that's a where to play piece in terms of the type of market that you can go after. You can spin it around and just say, basically, I'm going to be targeting, basically working mothers, and then what are their needs and what are the occasions. So there's two frames to kind of begin to get at with this where to play piece. What portion of the market? The question, once you work through that, then is sort of you begin to get into how to win. And that becomes often for restaurants begins to become a discussion about brand. At the end of the day, you're a consumer facing organization. You need to bring some sort of consumer promise into market. So then what's going to be that sort of relative differentiated point of view? For some concepts, it's a sense of place. For others, whatever that benefit is, it's typically a singular benefit. And the last piece I'll say then is that then the question often becomes, well, then how? How do you deliver it? And so, I'll go back to Cracker Barrel because it's relatable and things like that. So shorthand for Cracker Barrel would certainly be this idea of a friendly home away from home, right? We think about using while traveling, things like that. So that's your sort of your that's your where to play, but your basic consumer promise. Your principles below that, basically made with care, for, friendly service, things like that. So there's typically 3 or 4 principles underneath that. The confluence of those two things then helps shape the experience for people. So let me stop there. There's a whole bunch of stuff that I just threw out, but those are some of the frames. And when restaurants begin to really get their arms around those pieces, the benefit for them is a fewfold. One is it gets much more efficient in terms of what you're building and not building because you have clarity. The second piece is it ties in really nicely on the employee side. Because at the end of the day, you can begin then to think about your employee value proposition and how those two pieces connect together at the end of the day. So think about your values and behaviors, and are those then a reflection of the pieces I just talked about? And so that's ultimately, it's a lot to chew. Restaurants are doing it. The question is simply, are they being intentional and thoughtful about it?
Exactly that. And I think, that type of intentionality, like, and being deliberate about like who's the audience, what's the occasion, like the when, I think is very interesting because like I think lots of restaurants should be all things for all people, and especially as they grow because you grow your audience, just like the nature of any sort of like rapidly growing business. I mean, look at tech companies and they have this weird niche that they try to solve for. They add more and more services onto it, and then the messaging kind of gets lost in like, what is this product now? I think the same kind of happens with kind of restaurants as they scale. It's like, add more menu items, add more ways of consuming the product, where you can kind of consume the product, different age groups kind of go for different things, and you kind of get kind of lost or mired in the sort of like all things for all people. Is that something that you see happen a lot?
You will see companies do that, absolutely. And at the end of the day, the simple answer is, well, I've already got all these materials in place. I've already got my team here. What's the big deal in doing it? There is a cost. There's absolutely a cost in doing it typically in terms of just execution costs. Can you really execute it? And then even just the load at the store level, cognitively on your team, their ability to feel good about, what they're producing. So yeah, I do see companies do that. I will tell you, with so many companies I've worked with, very often you can take what you have and you can sort of represent it in a different way to different audiences, and you can pick up sales just by doing that. So it doesn't necessarily require a change in your offer. It often just requires a change in how you think about your concept and how you present it to different audiences.
Interesting, and I think about that, like, you mentioned there as well, the execution costs,
Yeah.
because I think that's like, that's like the crux of the issue almost, so to speak, is like, you're well intended when you want to launch and like grow your restaurant business, but like you have these dreams, desires, ideas, insights, but you have to execute on them, and you execute on the cost. Like, is that something that you probably lean into a lot? Because presumably, like, it's a question of focus. How do you be intentional? How do you be focused on like the real specific things that can move the needle or move the dial? Like, do a lot of the restaurants that you work with kind of grasp that, or they're coming to you because they don't grasp
that? So I think I'm thinking the question through, right? So when I look at here, by the way, Beautiful. I'm mulling. I'm beautiful. So I wish you could see it because it is awesome. I have this dogwood outside my window. It's spring here. It's pink. It's just gorgeous. Anyway, so I get to look at that when I think about things.
When you mull.
So I was thinking of two things. So let's talk about this in two ways. So one, I was just about the execution cost of, can you actually execute upon it? Whatever that is. So you were talking about bringing in more complexity into the organization to be able to reach new segments and new occasions. And the question always should just be is, can you execute on that? Because really, you're asking more of your team at the end of the day. So I see that mistake a lot. And really the question is, are you prepared to invest behind it? Invest into training, invest into marketing to be able to drive up that, whatever that new platform is, drive up the volume enough that your team's going to get enough reps, for lack of a better word, against it so that they can perform at a high level. So that was me answering my own question. Now, the question you just asked, which can you say?
I'm here to hear your insights. You know?
Well, I don't. Yeah, well, this is you and me working together. So I think, and your question was, just say it again because I lost it. It's the perils of getting old.
Yeah, like when it comes to like the execution costs, like you think that like the restaurants have a grasp on it themselves, or is that like why they come to you, because they don't have a grasp on how to pull it off?
So they have a really good grasp on the controllables, the food cost. They have a grasp on the labor cost. They may or may not have a grasp on what it takes to produce that labor cost in terms of time and steps and all those pieces. I don't know if one of the things that they have a good grasp on, back to people, is the sort of just the toll of producing that. So in restaurants, very often you will see people doing superhuman efforts to try to deliver upon whatever has been asked of them, because either they've not been given the right amount of money to do it in terms of labor hours, and been given the right amount of tools and systems, whatever it is. And so you see people all over the place who are trying to deliver on something that's been asked of them. And so I think that's what I'm talking about from an executional cost perspective, Alex, is that's more where I see it in terms of what's being asked of. And so I think the better organizations understand that, and they're working to figure out how to make it easier and better for their teams while still being able to deliver something to the consumer that is exciting and will draw frequency and all those types of pieces.
Yeah, it's interesting. And you were saying like that they have a grasp on certain elements, like they have a grasp on food costs, you know, like I mean, like the last 2.5 years have been like a frightening experience for many restaurants in terms of food inflation, commodity costs, kind of blowing things out of whack. I had somebody talk to me about chicken on this podcast, where like chicken, like for wings, because of the pandemic, that we basically, America ran out of wings basically, and there was a spike in that. Avocados, you know, like, and when it comes to like hiring and cost, I mean, I don't like to use the word crisis because I find like that's like, you know, like it's almost like a societal issue, but like there is an extreme hiring challenge that exists now in restaurants, like as in to find the hourly workers. It's just like good hourly workers is something that it doesn't seem to be going away anytime soon. And like the impact that, like, I don't think people realize the impact of not having staff on your like roster, like the impact that has in your business. Like I was in about 2 years ago, I remember I was walking down San Francisco, down Polk Street in San Francisco, Nob Hill, and there was a sign, and it was like outside a restaurant that I actually like going to, the Creperie, and they were like, the sign said something to the effect of like, we don't do brunch anymore. We don't do like a certain hour of time anymore, because of staff labor shortage. And like the impact that not having labor ready for your business is that like you might not be able to open in time. You might not be able to take full advantage of third party. You might not be able to like, you know, people aren't going to sign up for triple shifts anymore, or like at least do them in a way that they kind of begrudgingly did them in the past. Like there's people just not going to do that. And then coupled with, say, like certain metro areas can't get the talent they need for the price that they can offer. So like San Francisco is again another great example, because it's such an expensive place to live. Like the talent's kind of coming from the East Bay, it's like they got to commute. And then you see something like gas prices last year kind of skyrocket. And it's like people don't want to drive into San Francisco to go work there for that kind of price. So you've got all these different like sort of elements impacting how we attract talent. And I guess like this is a huge impact on sort of restaurant business culture, because if you can't attract talent, you can't run the business effectively, which places an additional burden on the staff you have. And so, how do you focus on retaining those staff? And that's something that I hear again and again and again, Chris, is like, how do restaurants rather think about retaining the staff they have, and like the programs, benefits, training, learning and development, all these different things, additional costs for these businesses to retain this. So it's almost like, how do restaurants even think about this sort of labor crisis, because there's so many facets to it?
It is. I'll go back to what you started with. It is a crisis. And I think you're seeing companies recognize it and deal with it in different ways. You got companies, to your point, like Chipotle, that have done a great job with layering a whole bunch of additional things for employees. The employee experience matters. It just matters. And so, at some point, companies, and the question is, are you willing to invest into it? Do you have the belief that it's going to pay out? All these types of things. And so some companies are doing that. Some companies aren't in a position to do that. But it is a big deal. And what I see is that a lot of companies are just trying to solve it on just fill the pipe with more people, fill the pipe with more people. The better ones are understanding they need to fix the retention problem. If they solve that problem, then it will release the pressure on getting more people in the top.
Yep.
And then there's just also the kind of person who's coming into the business as well. And is that person, without getting too deep into it, is that person the same as that you used to be able to attract? And again, all this leads down to, what can you deliver? And so, at some point, concepts are asking themselves, should I be delivering as robust an offering? Should I narrow up my offering to ensure that my team can deliver upon it? But then the question becomes, well, heck, I just deleted X amount of sales. And so nobody wants to do that. And so then typically the discussion becomes, all right, well, if you narrow up that offering to ensure you can better execute upon it, now can you put your offering in more channels? And so that you're still muscle memory, you're still executing on the same sort of product, you're just putting it in more places for the consumer to get. And so that can be a workaround to that. But these are absolutely huge challenges, and they're concept problems, right? They're not like labor problem. I mean, the labor piece affects the growth piece, as you said. And you can see it in the experience you have going into stores. So
which is you mentioned there's something, you're saying like more places for the consumer to get the restaurant, get the brand. Are you talking about like third party, curbside, and all these other types of like different ways of consuming what you offer? Or what are you getting after? What are you getting after there?
I'm getting after that. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, I think you've got to be mindful of what makes sense for your concept, but can you think of different ways? So if you're a concept, do you have basically grab and go in your store? Do you have third party? Do you have first party? Are you even contemplating, depending upon the size and scale of your concept, are you beginning to think about partnerships to be able to get some portion of your product into different places to allow people to purchase it? Are you thinking about grocery? All these things. The add-on benefit to this stuff, Alex, beyond just the sales piece, is if we kind of go back to a couple of just basic marketing principles, mental availability being thought of right when, but the other piece to mental availability is physical availability and being there when somebody wants it. That physical availability can reinforce the mental availability. So it's almost a circular piece. So by driving out your distribution, you actually are, you're getting obviously more points to be bought, but you're also just serving as a physical reminder. So she agrees. Did you hear the dog? So
I did.
It's interesting, licensing as an example, there's absolutely an income play there that concepts will go after. But the other piece is that there is just the benefit of just all those impressions and being a reminder for people. And then, there's a lot of different ways to think about that.
It's interesting. And third party comes up in, I would say, 90% of the conversations I have at restaurant people on the spot. Now, this pod obviously has hotels and it has casinos and everything else. So obviously they're not really talking about third party. But when I talk to restaurant people and we talk about third party, I feel like it's such a hot button issue that
many were taken kicking and screaming into the pandemic into third party.
Yes.
And there's this sort of pendulum shift in opinion where thank God for third party in 2020 and 21. And now we're at the 2022 post 22 experience where it's like, these guys are really taking a lot of margin out of this food. And we have this sort of like collective experience as consumer and employer, consumer and business, where I order like a burrito on Eats or DoorDash or whichever, and it comes soggy and kind of,
Yep.
you know, but like not designed to travel. And it was designed to be bought in a restaurant and eaten. And I don't blame anyone, because I look at the restaurant and like I get like they're trying to get the food out, and it goes into a guy on a moped who picks it up, who's probably not getting paid that much. So I'm not going to grill this guy for the delivery of my burrito. And then I can't speak to DoorDash or Uber Eats about the quality of my burrito, because you're doing like an AI chat in the app, and they're like, yeah, we'll give you $3 back for the next order you make. And you're like, okay, so like everyone's kind of like in this sort of 6 out of 10 experience where it's not nailed. And I had a great guy on the pod about 2 months ago, a guy called Jonathan Wetherington, JW, CEO of a company in South Carolina. I was going to say North Carolina and South Carolina, called the Shucking Shack Oysters, and multiple stores. And he told me that they've completely eschewed third party, for example. That he talks about it. And I'm curious your take on this, because this is kind of like the kind of conversations you have with your clients. Is like, you know, we're like, our dining experience is the experience. Like, you come for the oysters, you come for the beers, you come for the atmosphere of the restaurant. And he's like, that doesn't translate into third party for us. Right. And we're eschewing that. And they're willing to eschew those margin gains so that like people know when they go to the restaurants that like you're here for like all the combination of things, and that's what you're paying for. And I'm curious, because when you talk about like say the brand and getting the impressions, as the marketer, I am 1,000% behind that. I'm like, get yourself in front of as many people as possible. But then when I think of like what like a lot of your brand stands for, like if you go on say Eat Tonight, Uber Eats rather, and you type in like hot dog, do you care what the brand is in terms of like what comes up on the index? It's like Google searching a problem. You know what I mean? It's like you're going to click the first link. And I feel what I hear from people is like that seems to be like a brand problem for lots of people who really like operate within third party, is that like, how do you make your brand stand out on those platforms, or people realize that you are a brand, not a hot dog? You know?
Yeah, there's a lot in that. So there's, and I'll just, I don't know if I can reply, I don't know if I can keep all of them.
There was a lot, I know.
No, but it's good. I think we are getting, I worry as an industry that we, when I grew up, basically there was like fine dining and there was fast food. And I don't think we're gonna get all the way back there, but I do think that given the price increases that have gone on, that you're gonna really challenge people to use restaurants as an everyday occasion if you're not fast food, and then fine dining is fine dining. So I say that because I think for a lot of places, the question is, do you want to deliver an experience, or are you driving more of a transaction? And if you're driving more of a transaction, probably at that point, then yeah, you probably should be everywhere. If you're driving an experience, then there should be a price premium tied to that, and you should be darn well certain you can deliver that experience, whatever that means. And then you can charge appropriately. If you choose to go the third party path, recognize it's a pay for play. It's just, that is part of it. And there's all strategies in terms of how to work in there and to get seen and all those pieces. And then I also just think it's a competitive piece. At some point, you need to recognize. And so I'll remind restaurateurs, I'll go all the way back to gift cards for the bigger concepts, where in the beginning, gift cards came out and the third parties that got you on the shelves at wherever, they took crazy margin. And it was like, and two pieces out of that. And it's not dissimilar from the third party piece. One was a lot of the sales were incremental. A lot of the sales ended up having higher check associated with them. And if you weren't there, that was a visit that was going to happen. You weren't competing for some visit that may or may not happen. That's a visit that's going to happen. And so at some point, do you want to allow your competition to be able to build habit, right? And so as we think about, restaurants, everyone's got their repertoire of restaurants that they tend to go to, consideration set. You want to be in that set. You don't want to get displaced. So these are just things that each operator's got to think through. And some of it just is based upon their own business, what they want out of the business, where they are from a life cycle perspective, competitive pressures or lack thereof, which can be very geographically based. So, I mean, there's a lot to think through.
I thought that's a really interesting point, by the way, you just made there about the gift card. And the reason why I say that is it's like when I think about like affiliate marketing in digital advertising, for example,
Yep.
I like consider those, haters can come at me for this opinion, but I consider like affiliate marketing like bottom feeders. Like those people were going to convert anyway. Like when you click a Rakuten link to buy a pair of Nike trainers and you're getting that 10% off cashback or whatever it is, okay? I'm like, I was going to buy those trainers anyway, but I got them for 10%. So it's great for me as the consumer.
Yep.
Less great for Nike because they're losing 10% on the trainer.
Yep.
But like if there was an Adidas one that was there, would I just have like bought a pair of Adidas trainers if it's like a respectable alternative to that? Yep. And this is like the crux of your point there, which I thoroughly kind of see and get, which is like, better the devil almost, like that if the game has changed, you got to change with the game. Like if the rules of the game have changed and now we have third party and it's like, yeah, like this is the game that like most restaurants have to play it. And to your point, like you can eschew that, but you better have the pricing and the product ready to offset not being in that game, and I think that's a big question for a lot of restaurants then to be able to think if they were in that mindset, which is like, or a lot of concepts or whichever you want to call it, that like either they're there or they're not, but they better be prepared if they're not.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it gets back to, look, everyone's trying to drive towards first party, deprecation of cookies, everything else, paying the fees, and all that's true. I think the question is always going to be, everyone's great. So you're going to go to first party. How many apps are you going to keep on your phone? How many restaurant apps are you going to keep on your phone, realistically? Which gets to me back to consideration set and who are you typically using and all those pieces. Yeah. I think it's where you got to get back to thinking a little bit about your specific strategy. But in general, what I see is a lot of the operators I work with, I mean, trying to move people off of third party to first.
Yeah.
And so,
well, that's very interesting.
But to me, does that mean that you abandon third party, or does it mean that you're there just as it's really not, it's not an offensive play, it's a defensive play, back to my point about trying to blunt competitive activity. So it's just it's a way to, is one way to think about it.
When you mentioned first party a bit there.
Wait. Before you go, we're going to free will a little. So, and sorry about the dog. There is, back to your point about sort of the idea of branded search, there is a fair amount of data out there that will support, to your point, that a lot of those sales are going to happen anyway. And that you can test this, you can test your way. And so the way that I talk to operators about this is, are you paying for digital rent? Would you be there anyway? Sorry, I just sidebar because you were just to support you. That no, I totally agree. That in many cases, people are paying for stuff that they would have sales they would have gotten anyway.
But I think I'm a professional expert in marketing. That's my job. Do you know what I mean? I get this. Do you know what I mean? Whereas restaurant operator is not the kind of person that's day in, day out, like optimizing ads and websites and offers and discounts and life cycle and messaging and all these different things constantly, which I think is a personal edge for a lot of these businesses. I had an amazing guy on the pod recently, a guy called Derek Rosenbaum from Groucho's Deli, and he was kind of walking me through like his ideology around first party data. And you mentioned the word habitual earlier. You mentioned habit, and that triggered the original thought in my head. But now that we're in first party, I think I can contextualize it even further, which is that his big thing is how do you measure habituality, and like measuring it with data. And so like not wanting to offer discounts, but how do you know who your best customers are, like their frequency in terms of coming into the store, their frequency of like buying certain type of items. How do you test certain items in a given day
and see the results of it at different times when you're going to release a certain offer, and very much leaning into a data infrastructure approach to optimizing your business. Like, my take on that is that, like, if you were 5 locations or more, you should be absolutely leaning into building out your own data infrastructure now and not relying on your Toasts or your Squares or your anything there that has a sort of closed ecosystems. Like, you want to be able to build it, but like conceptually you need to be able to do that in the first place. Like, you need somebody who's like a data operator, infrastructure person who can kind of get that and help you get to that point. Is that something you see in your job, or like how do you talk to like clients of yours about sort of data infrastructure and using data? Because we're talking a lot about data.
Yeah. I guess I would offer, restaurants are retailers, right? And so retailers have always had a fair amount of information on their customers. And I think so. And so that's been a benefit of the space, that you've always been able to have insight into transactions, how transactions work, who the customer is and why they're using has been a little more opaque historically. There have been methods to get at those things, whether it was through surveying or whether it was through credit card data or any of those things. Obviously, now we're moving into a place, we've moved into a place where there is a lot more data, whether it's through back channel, basically through internet providers, or whether it's even just through some of our own first party data and through CDPs and things like that. So where's the breaking point where companies should do that? I haven't really ever. I think about it more from a revenue perspective. At what point do you have the revenue to begin to support sort of that investment, if that makes sense?
Yeah.
Because if you're dealing with a fast casual concept or something that's spinning, I'm going to put a number X versus another concept that's spinning Y, it just sort of, so that's a little bit more. And then the growth ambitions. At some point, there are some concepts that are like, nah, we think we're going to build out to this and we're done. I'm like, well, then how much of an investment do you really want to make?
Yeah.
And do you need to make versus no, we're going to blow and go. All right, well then I think really what you're going to need is this. So that's sort of how I've talked to people about it. But there's no doubt that no matter what, you do need to be gaining insights in some form or fashion. I don't care what it is. I'm dealing with a client right now, and we're trying to figure out what information we can get in terms of on a couple levels. One is basically when they built their stores, what were the segments around it? Who have we actually reached and not reached in that process? What kind of frequency? Why are they coming? All this stuff. Hopefully you can answer through some form and fashion. You can answer those questions. And if you can't, you should probably be trying to work to a way where you can. Because I think ultimately, forget marketing, you're going to make better decisions around product. You can make better decisions around pricing. You're going to make better future decisions even around where to put future stores. There's a whole bunch of pieces that are just really important with that type of information. Which again,
totally. And that's
no, I was going to say, which gets back to this idea of controllables. All operators, lots of things that they know, very comfortable in. Is these other pieces that we don't know. And so how do we get more insight into that and get more comfortable around that? Even if it's not perfect, like food cost is 25.3. This may be a little more inexact. Some cases it can be very exact, but at least we've got something that's a basis for future decisions.
Yeah, it's kind of like what was the phrase that there are known knowns and unknown unknowns.
Yes.
And I think I mean, I'm a big proponent of data. Like, I think like people think that you can be overwashed with data or data is expensive to kind of really build out, but like on a practical level, like you got to measure what matters. And I think that question is like, so we were talking about this earlier. It's like, it's so basic. It's like, who's the person who's coming in and buying your food? And it's like, I don't know. Well, figure out how to start there. You know what I mean? It's like, and start measuring something like that. And I think like, I would imagine that as we are 5 years out sort of vision, that what will separate sort of like when I say like sort of hockey stick growth kind of businesses in restaurants versus everybody else, a lot of it will come down to, like a lot of their success, I would imagine, when they would speak about it publicly, would be like the data infrastructure and the way they talk about data and how they're able to make decisions quicker than others. Like, I had somebody on recently
who was telling me maybe about 2 months ago, they were like a bar, they would do the take. They would do their Monday morning retro, and then like they kind of do their count, and then by Thursday they have the review of the data. Like they go through like a logbook of everything that's so like, and I was like, wow, so it takes you about a week, like after the thing has happened, to like get an understanding of what happened versus like, how do you like have that data already if you had the data infrastructure in place that could help you analyze that on the Monday. So you save yourself the 4 days and give you that extra 4 days to do your prep. Do you know what I mean? For like your next strategy implementation. I'm a big believer in that. And I think like, I remember about 11, 12 years ago when CDPs were coming on market when I worked in digital media.
Right.
And there were like, these Oracle Cloud, 150 grand kind of implementation kind of things. You know what I mean? Like now it's a SaaS that you can basically log in. You may or may not need an engineer to even help you build out a lot of this stuff. Like if you're using point of sale tools, like the kind of barrier to entry is so much lower now to even get going on measuring some of the stuff. And I think that's why Square, like Block or whatever you want to call it now, like your Toast have done quite well because they have a product that's very good entry level in terms of like getting an understanding of like your data. I mean, they are what I would call closed ecosystems. So if you did want to like export that kind of data, there is like a real pain in the arse to deal with it. But like ultimately that kind of gets you going. And I know we see Toast everywhere now and we see Square readers everywhere. So like a lot of people have that type of basic kind of data. But it's like evolving that to like a kind of living, breathing sort of life cycle machine. Like I look at the access to data and I kind of go, whoa, look at the opportunity for email marketing here. Look at the opportunity for push notification marketing. Look at the opportunity for SMS. And not every message you need to send somebody is, hey, it's your birthday, here's 50% off. Hey, you haven't come here, here's 50% off. There are other things you can do within those messages that don't have to be a discount. But I think we've all been tuned to think when we receive a message from a brand that it's got to be a discount. Like if you receive an SMS, like I'm looking here on my phone if there's any in my iMessage here from like those brands, like you get the three, I actually delete them also. Lol. But if I didn't, they'd be there and they'd be like, hey, here, try these 20% off these socks in the next 24 hours, and it's like, not everything has to be a discount, but I think we're tuned to it. So I think there's a real opportunity for lots of restaurants within this space as well to really think about their life cycle. Like what's the kind of message? How do you engender a type of like informational sort of, that type of awareness that you were talking about, you're just trying to like build out that number of impressions about your brand.
Yeah. So of course I just lost the second half of it. So,
I talk.
I
talk when I ask. Yeah. I talk.
You're Irish. I'm half Italian, so I'll pick up the slack.
Yeah.
So I wanted to react to two pieces. And of course, one's alluded. I want to talk a little bit about the use of emotion and the fact that everyone is, all right. So the two pieces. So the first piece is, I agree that you see everybody's using these to generally, and the part that drives me bonkers, Alex, is everyone's doing it to drive discounts on business they already have. What are you doing? Stop that.
Thank you.
Now, so when I talk with clients about their loyalty programs, I'm like, use it as an acquisition program, which is sort of a little bit like, what do you mean by that? What I mean by that is go build out underserved occasions. Go build out underserved channels. Go and use your discount dollars to do that. So for example, man, we're really weak on early weekdays lunch. Spend your dollars there. Please do not spend for a customer who's only coming on weekends, see if you can get them to begin to come during weekdays. So I think that's a piece where I really, and it sounds so basic, back to restaurants are simple, but it's like, don't invest your dollars for occasions that people are already using. You're just flushing money, right? The second piece that a lot of companies at this point just do, and a lot of it's just digital marketing, is they run with very rational based offers. It's just it's all basically price product. And at some point, the question should be, there's a lot of data to support this, but can you begin to use emotion in some ways to begin to connect your brand to those key occasions you want to compete for? Emotion doesn't need to be some big, I don't need a Christopher Nolan movie that's like, generating great stuff. But I do need some sort of reaction. I need some sort of just a smile, a nod, something internal that just reacts and begins to just again, put you in that consideration set for those occasions for which you want to compete. And so those are two things that sort of when I also just, I mean, yes to everything you said, but when I would add on that when I talk with concepts, I ask them to think about, use your loyalty program as an acquisition engine, and let's find a way to get some of your messaging to be more, at least trigger or create an emotion within somebody. So the basic thinking there is, I'm sure we're just in market, out of market, right? And I'm trying to get people who are more out of market and using emotion to begin to, when they move into market, at least consider and think of us more, be more likely to think of us.
Totally. And I think like it's interesting to think about it because like you said, like everything's so rational, like price, product, price, product. Why do you think so many restaurants think that way?
Well, I guess I'll push back. Do you think that's a restaurant problem, or do you think that's an American business problem? And do you think it's predicated on, let me just pull the thread through. Do you think it's simply a function of the Google Facebook duopoly, or do you think it's, I mean, like, I don't think it's unique to restaurants per se. And I think that restaurants over time have done, you and I can think of some really, we'll stick with big brands for it, big campaigns that certain concepts have pushed over the years that are not emotional based at all. I mean, you can look at the work that I'm not going to name names, but I'd ask everybody who's listening to this to just start to think about some big restaurant brands and think about how they've used. They're not really pushing product; they're pushing product,
Exactly.
but in a softer way, and they're using emotion. And they're just trying again to be thought of for those key occasions. So, do you think it's a restaurant thing, or do you think it's a general business thing?
Yeah, I think the Facebook sort of ideology of fewer, bigger, better. Like where they're messaging, they want you to have fewer ads, they want you to have bigger offers and a better way of communicating it. And I think what happens with something like Facebook, which is very direct response marketing, where you isolate your audience, like I want males 18 to 25 in Nashville metro area with a presumed income of XYZ in the targeting, and I want to put this message in front of them. And you're like, okay, or into sports. I'm a sports bar, and they're into the Tennessee Titans. Is that the team that is in Nashville? I don't know. Unfortunately for you. And but 49ers. But what I would say is like, I think this is in all facets of marketing now, which is that attributable ROI marketing, like attribution in particular, has been poisonous for marketing in general. I will stand by that comment as a personal buyer of ads and a marketing leader, that I think companies' obsession with tracking attribution has stopped companies from seeing the wood through the trees. And what I mean by that is like, oh, this person clicks a paid search ad, that means that paid search works really well. But in my head, I'm like, how did that person know to search for you? Like, they presumably saw that billboard on the highway, but like, I can't track that attribution to that billboard, can I? Unless I put a very particular kind of message in the paid search ad that says, hey, did you see this? And tie it together. And the point I'm making is that like, what happens is you have a very lowest common denominator where most of your ads, where most people will pay for Facebook and start there. I think Facebook is probably one of the best businesses to ever come out of the United States. Like, I mean, it's a $500 billion business. Like, I mean, it's incredible. And it has helped. I think it's probably the greatest SMB tool ever invented, because mom and pop coffee shop in the corner can take a photo of a coffee and upload it onto Facebook and run an ad and spend $100 and figure something out there and get in front of people. They can do that in 20 minutes.
Yep.
Google search. I had a call with two guys this week on Monday. A friend of mine was like, oh, we talked to these guys about their Google search. And I was like in my head going, this is crazy. The fact that I'm being asked to come in and like the fact that like paid search, you got to think of your keywords and your clusters and all the different permutations. Yeah, it's an efficient way of like marketing yourself per se, but like the process to get into it is just like, the lift. And then obviously TV, radio, press. Like, I think if people understood how the channels worked, better, I think we'd have a better mix of how people think about marketing. Like if you think about radio ads, for example, in Nashville, okay, and people are in car, so it's a car city. Is it a car city? I mean, besides the main kind of area where people go drinking, but like, so you have people in cars.
Yeah.
Like radio ads are designed to drive impact. Okay, so like if you're talking about like radio ad, like you're advertising like something to deliver like impact, like as in like go and buy this toothpaste today, visit this restaurant, you know, this offer stands until whichever, or we've launched our new sizzling steak and it's like visited on I-95 or whatever the thing is. It drives impact. Billboards drive impact, like in-store visits. Like you have a billboard near the store, it will drive people into the store. Like that works. And people can measure it, but it goes back to measuring it. So like most people, when they look at digital, go, I can see impressions, I can see clicks, and I can see redemption of said offer. And in one like trail because it clicked.
Right.
But like, do people have the discipline to track the impact of radio or billboards for their restaurants? You know, like if I said to you, I always talk about pulse strategies when people ask me about this stuff. Here's free advice for everybody. This is people talk about, I talk about pulse strategies, and it's like you run that billboard. Okay, how do you buy billboards? You probably buy them for like a month, or you buy them for like 2 weeks. That's typically like how you buy them. Okay, ask the media seller, the vendor, can you break it into week, break, week, break? Because if these things drive immediacy and they drive impact, what you want to do is like you run that ad, that billboard, tear it down for that week, and then put it back up and see what the lift and the fall in traffic is to your business to understand the incremental benefit of that traffic to your business.
Yep.
But like what I find is people, to your point, like, and I think this is like broadly like an understanding of like the impact of your marketing mix is like, I don't think people quite get like, if you run an ad nonstop with the same message, people are just going to have that quote unquote banner blindness. But if you're tactical about how you use these and you actually measure that type of traffic and you have them isolated from each other, like I'm not going to run Facebook, I'm just going to run in-store billboard ad outside the store. You'll be able to measure it and get a feel for the type of traffic people come in, with incremental lift in sales you have there. So you're able to know that that one billboard drives X dollars revenue more for your business. And you're like, okay, cool. When we run this ad, this is how much money we make. You know, it's like I used to have I just to spread the podcast and I'm doing all the talking. I had VW as a client when I was in London, and you know the Tiguan, it's like their kind of family SUV.
Yep.
And I sat through this entire kind of metrics presentation.
Yep.
And it was like, we want to invest in digital marketing. And it was like, no, don't do that. And they were like, we only want to buy ads online. And it was like, no, because what they learned from the econometrics was nobody bought the car except when they ran ads on TV. When the ads were on TV, people went in and they bought the car. When there were no ads on TV, nothing else worked for them. But like they were obsessed with running digital, and that can be from really good salespeople like Google and Facebook. Probably explained that there's probably a value there, but like the data doesn't lie. And I'm very much a believer in like really understanding each channel you do, which I would imagine is kind of what you explain to your clients as well. You know, it's like really get a feel for like how this is going to work and what the message and what the medium you're doing is to like drive that sort of traffic. Sorry, that was 5 minutes of me talking there, and this is your podcast, Chris. So I apologize. That's the first time I've ever done that in any episode, by the way. But yeah, I am very well. When it comes to marketing, man, I got opinions at the door.
You're a little passionate, and I'd rather have a discussion. So I'm gonna do two pieces here. So I think one is, and there was so much there. It's like, where do I want to grab on? So let me. So first of all, to your point about billboards, absolutely done that in my career. You cover them up. You don't even take them down. You just cover them up. And the companies will do that. They'll do it, and that's great. Here's the challenge for people at the end of the day. How the bloody hell does advertising work? And do you think that truly, and just think about your own life, do you think that it's an input output thing, and that the input and output is immediate? And the answer is not. And so very often what ends up happening is when people evaluate things, they kind of put an artificial box around the read period that they want to sort of look at. I've done it in my career. It's like, okay, we ran a flight of choose your medium. We've done this, and we put a box around when that thing did. We know darn well ad stock. The benefit continues long after, but we have no real good way of being able to capture that. if that makes
Yeah.
sense. Even if you look at marketing mix models, they struggle with that in terms of how to capture that long-term piece, which is a long way of saying that you do need to be a little bit careful of ROAS or ROI, however you want to think about it. You've got to look at it, you've got to understand it, but you've just got to take certain things with a grain of salt and recognize that the inherent way that media works, again, it depends on it. You're getting into a very rational based offer, it probably is immediate. If you're doing any sort of message that's going to be a little bit less rational and immediate, that benefit may not show up during that read period.
Yeah, totally. I mean, what's the famous John Wanamaker quote? You know, half my advertising is wasted. The only problem is I don't know which half. You know, I think like, you know,
Well,
like something like Coca-Cola. I mean, to your point there, you know, about media and marketing mix. Like if you're Coca-Cola, you're not advertising to people to buy our Coke. You know, you're advertising your lifestyle. And they're like one of the largest, the top 5 market like advertisers in the country. Their remit, their goal for success of their marketing is not like, you know, impressions, clicks, whatever else, you know what I mean? Or like direct, like we know who bought our Coke. It's like, we just need to sell $2 billion for the Coke in the United States next year. And that's our goal. And marketing will be judged whether we hit that or not, you know? And I think when it comes to like a restaurant, you know, like you saw those Taco Bell ads that ran at the Super Bowl, or in and around the time of Super Bowl, they had that band. There was like was it not Post Malone, or was some musician anyway. There was some band anyway. I can't even remember, some country, actually a Nashville band. I just don't know which one. And they were like, I thought the ad was phenomenal. I thought the whole campaign was phenomenal because I thought it was like, we ate Taco Bell while we were touring when we were like basically like broke and we were up and coming.
Right.
And we were eating it because it was the only place we could feed the whole tour bus within our budget. And I was like, well done. You have captured exactly, like, you got someone cool, because you don't want somebody who's just like kind of, you know, random kind of, here's random celebrity. You know, it's like, no, you got somebody who legitimately has a story to say about the impact that your business had on them and is able to tell it in a way that's not like, buy our burrito for $2. It's like, no, it's like the whole experience. And it's like, that I think really resonated with me. I was watching that and I was like, oh, this is great, you know, but like, hopefully that turns into sales for Taco Bell now, you know, it's like, that's the thing, you know, but like it wasn't offer led.
Pull that stuff from him and pull that through. So they were using a celebrity endorsement at the end of the day. They were buying the fame of that celebrity, right? At the end of the day, which probably had some benefit in terms of getting in the marketplace and news and things like that, probably reached their audience really well. They were able to figure that out spot on. How do you think they did, though, at connecting Taco Bell to Here's When You Use? Now, I'm going to answer for you just one piece. I'm going to take my turn now. Is the argument simply could be, when you're that damn big, it doesn't matter. When you're that damn big, all it matters is just maintain fame. Everybody knows who the hell you are, knows when to use you.
Yep. It's
just staying up here at the top of mind, which gets back to just, I want for people to understand the conversation we're having depends where you are in your life cycle. The big brand playbook and the starting playbook are different playbooks.
Totally.
And I know you know that, but I just so people don't, you know, I sometimes have to talk to people because they see the things the bigger brands are doing. It's like, well, they get to do that because they're where they are. And if you try to do that now, you will not have the same effect. So I just think that's
really clever. Like smaller upstarts, like concepts that you're launching. Like the question is, how do you outbox? Like, you know, how do you be like a foxy boxer or whatever the phrase is for like kind of getting around the ring, like, you know, punching smartly. I think like, and this is where like obviously like we were saying, Facebook SMB does so well because you can kind of do it there. But like at the same time, you know, you need to be, I would think that to generate the level of like sales that you would want to expect, to generate the level of like notoriety, fame for your restaurant in your year 1, year 2, year 3, you got to box smartly in terms of like your marketing. And it doesn't necessarily have to be discount based. I think that's kind of what we're getting at here is like, you know, like how do you like make people, like tech always talks about product market fit. Like if the product works, it'll advertise itself. I think with food, that's kind of slightly different. Like you can catch fire lighting in a bottle and kind of go viral, so to speak.
You know what I mean? Which
Yeah.
happens like Dave Hot Chicken, for example. Like that's what happened with those guys with TikTok and their 200 whatever locations now. Amazing product, amazing company. But like not everyone is like that. So like your food will get you a type of word of mouth, but a word of mouth as well is like limited. Like referrals are a very hard business to scale. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like it's like very hard. You want volume, like you want people to show up, you want to clamor. So like how do you think about like sort of like making people aware? You know what I mean? And to your point, it's like it really depends where you are in that cycle of like growth. Are you like upstart? Are you within your 3 year kind of growth phase? Are you kind of looking to scale on from there? But ultimately, it's like, you know, for me, I think like there's a type of like level of like, especially with food businesses, because I mean, I follow like every single one, and it's basically my entire online experience now. And it's like, you know, that type of level of like, I want to see how the sausage is made. I love that authenticity. I don't really kind of buy into like these TikTokers that go into restaurants and they try like every single thing in the restaurant. Like, oh, I give this a 7 out of 10. I was like, who are you to give this a 7 out of 10? You know what I mean?
By the
like
way, the funny, just to separate that, it would actually be fun to have like culinary teams, because culinary teams do that. Like I've done that. I mean, we've gone and eaten, I mean, 70 meals in X amount of time, and it would just be, there's a reality series somewhere in that, and just the GI impact it has at the end. And I mean, that's a totally different piece.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think but like I think you're in a very fascinating position, Chris, because like what I love about like consulting in this context is that like you see a myriad of different companies in a myriad of different form factors, you know, success factors. Are they thriving or are they like in a sort of like a struggle zone? You know, you see them in terms of like, are they single location, 5 location, 20 locations? I mean, and they all have like, there's like a true for some, relevant for all kind of problem with a lot of them. You know, a lot of them have like probably like food menu issues. You know, if they're their challenges, they probably have like hiring challenges, and they have their sort of managing their margin challenges. You know, like there's kind of like these kind of through lines that exist throughout all these kinds of businesses, irrespective, I think, of like whether you're like single location or like 20 locations, you're still looking at all those kind of similar metrics.
Yes. How do you like that? Right. I'm just going to put like a cherry on top for you. Like, yes. No, I here's what I want.
I was like, oh, I can't believe I'm wrong.
No. I mean, I look, so what are the common themes and threads? You know, at the end of the day, this is important though. You've got to kind of go back to where is somebody in their life cycle? There are mature concepts out there that are trying to figure out, does my concept still work? Is this brand still relevant? What do I need to change? How am I going to change it? Everybody's at some point constantly dealing with food and labor and all those pieces. But I think I'm going to focus for a second a little bit on that concept fit. So when you're starting, it's basically, have I nailed the concept? Do product market fit? Am I there? Do I got it? When you get that piece right and you get your operating model and your financial model, then it's blow and go. It's easy.
Yeah.
At some point though, you probably reach a point where like, okay, I now need to grow AUVs, which gets back to the beginning of the conversation, which is, well, am I going to layer in new day parts? I'm going to layer in new channels and the complexity. And then you have to start to think that piece through. That drives for a while. And then at some point, then you get to this point, now you're really mature and big. And then you're sort of going, how do I keep this thing fresh and relevant and all these pieces? Because at some point we've sort of now moved past the hype cycle and we're into something else. And so there's the challenges change depending upon where you are. And hopefully for companies, it's a little bit of a continuous cycle, right? Because I mean, the other thing is just sort of, but that is, so I don't know if it's one thing. I think it just depends upon kind of where that company is in their life cycle. And, you know, I deal with companies at all three of those places. And I will offer that clarity around your concept and, you know, and what exactly you think you should be delivering and how, I just think is ultimately critical, which gets back to the open around, you know, who are you trying to attract, you know, what occasions are you trying to compete for? I think those are really, really critical questions that people should always be sort of asking themselves. And then do they have a plan for how they want to win those? Which is
I can't think, I was going to say, I can't think of a better way to like finish off the episode. I think, Chris, like, I think that's exactly it. I mean, like understanding those questions, where you are in the moment of your business, and really thinking hard and hiring somebody like you to come in and help them make that happen. I think is probably the best way of like finding that type of success. Do you have any like because this has been a great chat, I have to say, and this is probably the most engaged chat in the sense that I've been very much like giving my own personal. Usually I don't give my hot takes, so I have to say I have spicy takes, hate attribution. But no, man, honestly, this has been phenomenal, and I really have enjoyed the conversation. I think like, yeah, I mean, I never normally go this long. I just think that there was so much goodness in this that I'm delighted that we had the chance to connect and really get it recorded.
Well, I just thank you for the opportunity to talk. It's I love this space, always have. There's just a lot to do in it and a lot of different ways to think about, and the people it attracts, I think, as you probably learned as you've been in it, they're just good people. So it's fun.
Great
so thank
people.
you for the opportunity to talk. I appreciate it.
You're a star.